Well, welcome everyone and Shio. Hello in Cherokee, as we learned on our second adventure session with Cherokee Elder Gil Jackson, and some of you've heard me introduce our adventure series that way. We're so excited to offer you this adventure series geared for young people, engaging for all ages. I'm Julie Judkins. I'm the Director of Education and Outreach here at the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. And with my amazing colleagues on the line, we, as all of you have been doing this year, have been pivoting our regular education workshops for teachers, and we went virtual. So this week's session and hike, we're in Pennsylvania, and we are going to talk about what makes a place unique in our virtual hike up the trail. Led by our session today, Tawnya Finney, who has been a social studies educator in Waynesboro, Pennsylvania since '96. She is Trail to Every Classroom alumni, which is one of our programs, and has participated in many Chesapeake Bay Foundation workshops over the years. These educational experiences and professional development have fostered her love for examining the characteristics of regions through a geographical and environmental lens. She recently became a National Geographic certified educator, and in her spare time, she loves to explore the outdoors through hiking, cycling, skiing, travel, and photography. Along with her husband, she's backpacked sections of the AT, John Muir Trail, and has cycled along the Great Allegheny Passage and the C&O. And lastly, she is a dedicated Potomac Appalachian Trail Club volunteer and is caretaker of Tumbling Run Shelter for almost 30 years now. Katie Hess is our other speaker today. Katie coordinates and directs the South Mountain Partnership, which was launched in 2006. And it's a public-private partnership between the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources and the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. It's grown into an alliance of citizens, businesses, nonprofits, academic institutions, and local, state, and federal government agencies and officials collaborating to envision and secure a sustainable future for the South Mountain landscape region. And we'll learn much more about that in the presentation. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to Tawnya to get us started on our session today. Thank you all so much.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tawnya Finney, and I will be introducing a sense of place, and will then pass it off to Katie, who will be taking more of a deep dive into a sense of place in South Central Pennsylvania. Okay, so again, we're talking about a sense of place. What makes a place unique or special? And we can answer that question by talking about the physical and cultural characteristics of a place. So let's start with place. It's one of the 5 themes of geography, and it asks, what's it like to live there? So you might meet up with someone when you're on vacation, and you may say, well, I'm from Waynesboro, Pennsylvania. And they could say, well, what's it like to live there? You can answer that first by describing the physical characteristics of a place, such as landscape, whether you have rolling hills or plains, or if it's a coastal region. You could also talk about the habitat of the place in which you live, or the place that you find special or unique. Do you have rivers or creeks, big lakes, wetlands, fields, forests? Another way to answer the question, what's it like to live in a place, is by describing the type of climate you might have, whether it might be moderate if you live in a desert climate, or if you have extreme weather conditions, extreme hot or extreme cold. And then one final way that you can answer what's it like to live in a place is by describing any kind of natural disasters that you might encounter in living in your region, such as if you live along the coast, do you have to worry about hurricanes? Or if you, say, live out in the western region, do you have to worry about earthquakes or forest fires? So physical characteristics or physical features is one way to describe what a place is like, what makes it special, what makes it unique. Another way to answer that question, what's it like to live there, is by talking about cultural characteristics. Cultural characteristics include ethnic groups and languages. It could include also indigenous people and their heritage and the legacy that they leave behind. Another way to answer the question, what's it like to live in a place, or what makes a place special, is by talking about occupations and economy, bygone years, or even what's happening in the present day as far as industry and manufacturing. You could also talk about population. Do you live in an urban region or a suburban region? Do you live in a bedroom community? Or is it fairly rural in the place in which you live? And one other way to describe a cultural characteristic is by talking about various religions of a place and what its influence is on the local communities in your region. Now, one way that we talk about place as well is by talking about regions. It's something geographers are really like to invent and come up with, and they're typically grouped together by either physical characteristics or by cultural characteristics. So here in South Central Pennsylvania, we live right along the Mid-Atlantic region, so middle of the Atlantic Ocean, like along our coast. And then we also live in a region called Megalopolis, or the region of big cities, from Boston down to Roanoke. And we also are in this south central region of Pennsylvania. So regions, again, another place that geographers like to invent, and another way to describe a place and what makes it special. So I am going to hand it off to Katie, who is now going to apply all of this to our South Central location.
Thank you, Tawnya. So I am Katie Hess. I am the director of the South Mountain Partnership, and we are one of Pennsylvania's 8 conservation landscapes, 5 of which actually adjoin the Appalachian Trail corridor in Pennsylvania. I believe there's like 280 miles of the AT running through Pennsylvania and through 5 of our conservation landscapes. So a little bit more about the South Mountain region and why we were identified as a specific region and what contributes to that is really demonstrated best through this map. And you'll see that at the top of these Blue Ridge Mountains, labeled here in the blue, circled in the red, there's a northern point, and that is where we are located. It's at that northern point now circled where you can see the Piedmont region coming together with the Blue Ridge Mountain region, coming together with the Ridge and Valley region. And that is what makes our place so unique. If you'll see on this map, that really doesn't exist elsewhere in the country except for down here in Georgia. And because we are so far much more north than Georgia, we actually are like, you know, a very unique place. There is no other place like this region in the US. So here's another way to look at it. We are located along the Appalachian Trail corridor in Pennsylvania. And when we zoom in a little bit, we zoom into Pennsylvania, here is our region sitting right in South Central Pennsylvania. And we are the northern tip of the Blue Ridge Mountains, as I said earlier, but we're also the northern tip of the South Mountain, which runs down through Maryland all the way to the Potomac River. And we were identified early on in the Appalachian Trail Landscape Partnership as one of the focus areas along the entire stretch of the Appalachian Trail. A lot of those were identified based on opportunities for conservation, but also based on development pressure and other challenges to maintaining the trail experience. And that, unfortunately, is what our region, actually both were identified in our region. We do experience immense development pressure here in South Central Pennsylvania as being part of the logistical center of the East Coast and that infrastructure, but we also have incredible amounts of rare and threatened species and lots of opportunities for protecting them. So like I said, we are one of Pennsylvania's 8 conservation landscapes, and those were created in the early 2000s as a way to engage community members outside of the state forests and the state parks. And the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources really deserves a lot of credit for this initiative, because as far as we are aware, this is the only state initiative of its kind. There are landscape scaled initiatives throughout the Northeast, the West, and the Northwest, especially in the United States, but not specifically state run or state launched. And so Pennsylvania has a legacy, actually, which I didn't know when I started this job, of being at the forefront of a lot of conservation, and continues that through this program. And this is an emerging specialization within the conservation field. So back to our map, we are located in South Central Pennsylvania, and the Appalachian Trail actually runs up through the north of our region and up into the Kittatinny Ridge, where it runs northeast and really starts to touch the other conservation landscapes known as the Schuylkill Highlands, Lehigh Valleys and Greenways, and the Pocono Forests and Waters as it continues up into the Delaware Water Gap and into our neighboring states. So for those who are familiar with South Central Pennsylvania, this is the core of our region. These are actual boundary markers of municipalities that are considered the core of our region, although we do work outside of this area. But we're bounded loosely by Chambersburg on the west and the I-81 corridor, past Shippensburg, Newville, all the way up to Carlisle. We have Dillsburg here on the northeast, and the Route 15 corridor bounding us on our east through places like York Springs and east of Gettysburg. But really, it's this core. This is the Appalachian Trail. This is the core of our region. This is what we consider the spine of our region. The AT running up and down Michaud State Forest, one of the largest forests in Pennsylvania, but also containing some of our earliest state parks like Mont Alto, Caledonia State Park, Pine Grove Furnace State Park, and Kings Gap Environmental Center. So the way that we speak about our resources contributing to our sense of place and what it means to be in the South Mountain region are defined by 4 landscape resource types. And we talk about them as natural resources, cultural or historical resources, agricultural resources, and recreational. And it's really this unique convergence and having all of these things together that really creates a unique sense of place for us. Without any of these resources or one group going away or being weakened in a way would really contribute to a loss of our character and how we function as a society, or how we understand ourselves and our identity. So when we talk about natural resources, those are things like our water quality, our forests, our mountains, vernal ponds, habitat, clean air. Cultural resources, if you've heard of Gettysburg, that is within our region, but it's more than just a military park. It's a lot of interpretation of the everyday person's experience, not just the soldier's experience. And there's also a lot of open space and conservation happening there. But there's also historic barns. If you've ever heard of a Pennsylvania bank barn, we have the best collection of that running through Adams County and off to the east. And let's see what else. We count some of our state parks as cultural resources since they really set a precedent. in our state and for conservation as a whole in Pennsylvania and the East Coast and later the nation. Agricultural resources we define as, healthy soil. We have one of the largest contiguous areas of prime farmland in Pennsylvania that actually, I think, outrivals Lancaster County. So if you think you like Lancaster County, there's something to see here as well. And we have a lot of diversification happening in our farms. That's for another day. But we have a lot of, farm stands and very unique sort of value-added product and product additions kind of sprouting up. And that's a very unique thing to our sense of place. Lastly, recreational resources, obviously the Appalachian Trail here. But in addition to that, we have a lot, our geology actually contributes in large part to having cold water fishing, fisheries, and recreational opportunities that people come from all over the world to experience. So we have that, we have a booming agritourism industry. So just a little brief description of what each of these resource types means to us as we seek to preserve our sense of place and our uniqueness. A little bit more in depth, this is a great view of what our Chimney Rocks looks like. Again, because of the map that I showed you earlier, where the Ridge and Valley, the Piedmont, and the Blue Ridge Mountains all converge here, we have a large collection of species and ecological systems kind of being deposited here. And we need to keep them healthy, and we need to provide corridors through which they can get to other large wildlife corridors and such. And we essentially are that highway for those rare and threatened species. A little bit more about cultural resources. We're learning more and more through archaeology that the Native American activity in the valleys was a lot earlier than we thought. We thought that people didn't inhabit the valleys in our region until much later, but through some archaeological research that has been happening over the past 5 years, we've learned that it dates back even further. And so there's really an understanding of archaeology and antiquity to the South Mountain landscape based on that Native American history. So we also saw an iron industry boom in the 18th and 19th centuries, obviously the Civil War. And what I love is that we are part of the beginning of the American forestry and environmental movement. So those places, not only structures, but those landscapes associated with that history still live today. And we can interpret them, we can preserve them, and we can use them to really leverage where we're going in the future and what we want our future to be. Lastly, agricultural resources. I think I kind of went into a little bit of depth here already, but just to call out a few things. The South Mountain actually sort of bisects our region and really unites our region at the same time. In the western portion, like we have a western valley and we have an eastern valley. And in the western valley, there's a lot of like large scale crop production and dairy cow industry. And on the east side, because of the really unique structure of soils and microclimates there, we have the South Mountain Fruit Belt, or the Northern Adams County Fruit Belt, as it's called, and to others, the emerging South Mountain cider region, where a lot of hard cider is being produced. And it's because of this unique geology, topography, and everything combining that we're able to do these things. Lastly, this is a picture of me and my niece. We have these world-class recreational resources, 60 miles of the Appalachian Trail, the fly fisherman's paradise, is it fisherwoman? We have awesome mountain biking, infrastructure, bird watching, historic and cultural resource, tourism, and that agritourism, all kind of coming out of these landscape resource types that surround the Appalachian Trail. This is sort of how we visually represent the things that I was just trying to say through words and pictures. But every time we are confronted with a project that we think may move us toward greater sustainability, or that a partner comes to us and wants to work on, we look at the property or the project in this way. We think about the natural resources, the agricultural resources, the cultural and historic, and the recreational resources that could be impacted through that project, or what associated partners could be pulled into the project. So we actually can apply this to the Appalachian Trail itself. This is a way to sort of read the landscape and better understand all of the various values that are kind of like stacked on a landscape. It's not just land. It always has an associated story of people or events that have happened there. So when you look at the Appalachian Trail, which is represented on this map by the red line, it is running through the South Mountain in our region. And so obviously it's a recreational resource because it's a footpath, but it also serves as a natural resource because, even back in its day, Benton Mackay envisioned the trail more as a corridor and as a mega greenway, a place of wilderness that all people would be able to access for rejuvenation. And that means that it's much more of a natural resource, a potential climate mitigation corridor nowadays. And for those reasons, it was really culturally significant. It was a shift in perspective. It was a huge project, a huge undertaking. And so we also consider it to be a cultural and historic resource. All right, so here's another example of how to kind of read a landscape or read a place for something more than what is obvious or what you're being, told. This is a picture of Ralph E. Brock, and he was part of the first class to attend the Pennsylvania Forestry School in Mount Alto, which is in the heart of our region. Here's our regional map, and the location of Mount Alto is here at this star. So Ralph Brock is obviously a pioneer. We can tell in this photo that this class is entirely white, except for Ralph Brock being the only Black man. And so this is a great story to tell, to demonstrate that all types of people were involved in conservation in the beginning of the forestry movement and essentially the environmental movement. So that gives it definitely like a more cultural understanding and tint. Ralph Brock went on to pioneer the science of composting as we know it today. And it tells a painful story also of our landscape, where he left our region because of racism and moved to Philadelphia, where there was a more accepting population, and we lost that great science mind because of that. So we consider this an agricultural resource as well because it's teaching forestry, which itself is a type of agriculture. And then obviously forests are contributing lots of natural resource benefits, not just the wood and timber product. So lastly, I kind of alluded to this earlier, but we have these specialized agricultural districts running in the Eastern Valley and the Western Valley of our region. And This region shown in red is actually considered the South Mountain Fruit Belt. It is a National Register of Historic Places district. And it is such because this is a very unique way of farming. It's a very unique type of farming, and it has its own culture around it. Actually, before I took this job, I did a little bit of cultural resource research of this region. And the one thing that always came to the top was the culture of the type of farmers here. They're very aggressive in their forethought and how they are running their businesses. Once a particular variety of fruit stops selling at a market, it's out. They're constantly making adaptations. They're not stagnant. They're always innovating. And so for that reason and lots of other reasons, they're being called out as a great cultural resource of at least state significance, lending to the cultural value of this region. Obviously, there's agricultural value to the region since they're producing crops, and also agricultural resources and farmland often provides natural resource benefits like water percolation. Under the right farming conditions, soil will be healthy and will not be eroding, so there's the potential for having those natural benefits as well. So I think earlier you were asked to think about your home landscape and think about the places that are unique to you and your special places. And so this is my response to that. In the South Mountain region, as you've already heard, we have that specialized agricultural region on the eastern slopes. That's this photo in the left. These are rows of, I think these might be apple trees. They run like thousands of acres, beautiful thousands of acres of fruit trees. And then we have the beautiful South Mountain in the background carrying the Appalachian Trail through the region. We have rock outcroppings, which are part of our geologic heritage, really understanding the geology and those really long-term changes that created the landscape as we see it today. And then we have many reservoirs up on the mountain. Because the mountain is forested, it produces really great water filtering and gathering capabilities. And so many of our residents are watered or fed through reservoirs such as this on our South Mountain. So just to bring this back to the trail, many of our residents are getting their water from this reservoir called Long Pine. Where do you think your water comes from? Where does your water come from when you're at school? Where does your water come from at home? Do you think it only comes from the pipe? Well, what about before it goes into the pipe? Where on the land is it coming from? And then where do you think that Appalachian Trail hikers get their water? If they're, sleeping under the stars every night and they don't have a kitchen or a bathroom to go to, where do you think they're getting their water? Every special place, obviously, is cared about. We care about places, but they'll only stick around, they'll only stay beautiful, they'll only stay healthy and functioning if people like you and me care for them and go out of our way to care for them. So we really want to leave you with, what in your region is important to you? What are the interesting or special places that you want to see last throughout your lifetime? Consider how you might volunteer your time or your expertise or your skills to helping that place thrive. And there may already be a group out there that feels the same and that you could join in really caring for that place. Some of the benefits of volunteering and getting out there and contributing in a volunteer group is that, it builds you up as a person. You'll feel better about yourself. you'll build confidence, you'll build new skills that you didn't have before that then you can put on your resume someday. And you'll meet people, you will create relationships. Oftentimes you'll be outside if you're working on a trail or a natural resource. Often, if you're working in the cultural resource field, you might be outside also, you know, if you're a mason or part of a groundkeeping crew. And ultimately, like, it's good for your health and it's good for the health of your community. It's something that a lot of people are returning to. So great ways to get involved include, obviously, volunteering for the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. You can do this by being a trail maintainer, volunteering with your local AT community if you're fortunate enough to have one, and lots of committees. There are also conservation landscapes such as the South Mountain Partnership that you can contribute to. If you're up in the Northeast, those are called Regional Conservation Partnerships, or RCPs, and they are run out of the Highstead Center. There are often volunteer opportunities around those. Around here, we also encourage people to volunteer with their local state park and state forest friends group, such as here, it's the Friends of Michaud State Forest, the Friends of Pine Grove Furnace, Friends of Monte Alto, Friends of Caledonia, and Friends of Kings Gap. And on top of that, there are so many other nonprofits to give your time to. And I've just included this short list here.
So we thought that it might be fun to have an interactive map of some places that you find special. So I'll give you a few right here in the South Mountain region. Moving hikers that are heading northbound will run into the Mason-Dixon line. And this is a special place because it separates Maryland from Pennsylvania. It's a state line. So people are moving into a new state. And oftentimes hikers are thinking that they are moving from the south into the north when they're through hike. Also, if a lot of people will say if you're standing on the southern part of the state line, that you might say Appalachia. And if you're standing north of the state line, you might say Appalachia. So which one is it for you? Also, as you're hiking through the South Mountain region and here through Michaud State Forest, we have the halfway point of the Appalachian Trail. Now, this is a picture of the honorary halfway point. The official halfway point changes from year to year because of trail relocation, but it happens right here in the South Mountain region. So this honorary spot, there's a mailbox there and people can sign in. They get their pictures taken with it. And I believe if you head a little bit further north, I think that Catherine said she ate ice cream at Pine Grove Furnace State Park. This is where folks who are hiking the Appalachian Trail will eat a half gallon of ice cream, marking their journey in reaching the halfway point. Also in Pine Grove Furnace State Park, we have the Appalachian Trail Museum with so many artifacts from the Appalachian Trail in its beginning years, as well as artifacts from later. You can see Grandma Gatewood's head sneakers there. They have a large archive there. It's a great stop as you're traveling through this area. One place that is really special to me and my family is the Tumbling Run shelters. These are the shelters that our family has maintained for almost 30 years now. Next year will mark 30 years. And it's our special home away from home. We run into so many people there, meet great people from all over the world. And it's just a place. We live so close to it that we are out there almost every night meeting new folks, and it enriches us. So we thought it would be kind of neat for you guys to drop a pin. The way you do this is you just pick up a pin and add a marker to the map of someplace special. You can, once you add that marker, I will hopefully be able to demonstrate this here. Pick up a pin and let's say we drop it at Boiling Springs. That's the Mid-Atlantic regional office. So you would type in Boiling Springs or your special place. You could add in a descriptor. You can save it, and then you can also stylize it, add a picture, and just state why it is a special place to you. What meaning does it have for you? And the larger question, just to kind of wrap all of this up, is we have all of these special places. So what conservation efforts are in place, and what is your part in conserving and preserving the places that are special to you? So with that, I will turn it back over to Julie.
Well, thank you so very much, Katie and Tawnya. If I'm going to hold space to see if anyone has any questions now that we've gotten to the end of our presentation. What's a bank barn is the first one. And then the second one is, how far back does the archaeological record indicate inhabitants moved into the South Mountain region?
Oh my gosh. Great questions. So the bank barn that I referenced is a Pennsylvania bank barn. And this is a type of architectural design of an agricultural barn, laid out and designed in a specific way that allowed the farmer to make it as efficient and functional as possible for the work that farmer would undertake. And so a bank barn usually is dug into the side of the hill and literally has a bank, like a bank of soil that a wagon can be pulled up and into the barn. And then the barn typically cantilevers out over the front, which in the front of the barn then creates a sort of like a porch or like a roof for the farmer to not get wet when it's raining, as the farmer does chores and feeds the livestock that are living under that or in the first floor of that barn. And again, those are typically found in our region of South Central Pennsylvania. The second question, how early is the archaeological evidence?
If I can add in, I do know that we have some rhyolite quarries of prehistoric Native Americans in our region near Caledonia State Park that they date back 8 to 10,000 years. Yeah.
The rhyolite is really important. It's a rock that was actually quarried by natives up on the ridge of the mountain, and that was some of the earliest that we knew about.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you all so much for joining us on our adventure series.